Ontario goes alone with carbon pricing, what kind of impact would it have on its economy if the neighbors are not going as aggressively?
The question is, well, if Ontario goes alone on carbon pricing, that's complex. BC has gone alone, and is not severely impacted BC. The National Roundtable has, we quote the figures in our report, has looked at if Canada goes alone relative to the United States and found the impact to be very modest as well. So there are no such calculations to my knowledge on exactly similar calculation for Ontario, but certainly the similar circumstances show not a large impact. And yet there are benefits down the line when the world finally agrees on how to price carbon. The sooner we get in, the less the damage will be or impact will be on our economy if we're already factoring in a price of carbon early.
What do you mean not a large impact? Can you quantify it?
Pardon
Can
me?
you quantify it?
No, we can't quantify it because nobody's crunched the numbers on that to my satisfaction. I haven't seen any data on Ontario. But we do know generally in these circumstances, better to get in early, begin to shift your economy, the price on carbon early, so that there's not a great impact when you have to buy in at a late date to a world agreed price on carbon. When there'll be a big jump in your activity, rather than gradually shifting, as British Columbia is doing. They're in year 3 of their carbon tax, and so their economy is shifting to accommodate that.
Commissioner, you talked again about road tolls, that perhaps it's time to do that as well to sort of cut down on the greenhouse gas emissions that motorists are putting into the atmosphere. It's something you've mentioned before. I mean, this is a very politically unpalatable suggestion. A lot of governments don't want to start charging motorists because it won't get them reelected, and we are in an election year. So how realistic do you think it is to ask governments to, create road tolls?
Well, governments have to have the courage to deal with their election commitments and to manage the province. It's not my job to adjust my recommendations for political expedience. It's my job to assess the situation and consider what policy options are available. Certainly we have a problem with emissions in transportation sector. Certainly we know we have too many single vehicle occupancy trips, and that's a large part of it. You look out just in the great GTA, and on any morning you'll see one person in a car, and I think the averages I've seen is something like an average of 1.1 if you look at all the traffic. So there is huge opportunity. Even if we could somehow double the occupancy in cars, we could tremendously cut the congestion on the roads and tremendously reduce the fuel consumption as well as the greenhouse gas emissions. So I think it's the obligation on me to speak for the environment and what policy options are best suited. And other jurisdictions are doing these kinds of things. So, and they have done with some success, and I've talked about that before. So the political palatability of these things is not my problem.
Don't you actually have a role in trying to help sell these ideas to the public? And in that sense, like, what would you say if you are encouraging the government to bring in carbon pricing or road tolls? How would you suggest that the public be sold on the idea? Like, what would you do to try to persuade the public? You got to do this. We really need it.
Well, I sort of think I am, and I have in my many and sundry reports. Let's go through it again. You have to first accept that climate change is a challenge and a problem that is causing damage, causing us expense, and will continue to be a problem in the future, and a problem of increasing severity. And that's the starting point. Then you have in your mind that you're going to do something about it, and one of the things we have to do is to reduce the carbon intensity of our economy. Now, there are different ways of doing that, but one of the simplest things that many economists recommend is starting putting a price, because there are costs associated with emitting carbon. If you burn coal, there are external costs that we're not paying for. If you internalize those costs to the production of energy, then yes, you have to pay more, but then it becomes the society and the economy work to remove those inefficiencies. And you've got to give an economic incentive to decarbonize the economy. And that's, if people don't accept that there is climate change, there's nothing we can do about that. If people won't take any kind of short-term increase in costs and to get long-term benefits, I suppose there's nothing we can do about that. But you ask me, how can we pitch it? We just try to explain it and pitch it and show that there is long-term gain. The National Roundtable figures show that there is long-term gain. They've also shown that there are good reasons for Canada to go ahead without the United States. So we've just got to keep doing the explanation, I suppose.
How concerned are you that given just 2 days ago, the PCs very specifically put in their platform, I know you're an officer of the legislature,
That's right.
you respond to the legislature, but they could be the government, and how concerned are you that there's a promise out there we will never implement a carbon tax?
Well, there are, as I just said, other ways of decarbonizing the economy without a carbon tax. Now, they're more complicated. There are other things you can do. The point is, as an officer of the legislature, I have to look at the CCAP program, this 2007 CCAP program, and report by law on the progress this government made to date. And that's what I'm doing. I can't account for political platforms or other things or speculate in what happens in the future. Certainly, if there is a new government, the new government can look at CCAP and maybe change the requirements. But today we have a plan, and it's working to a little bit, not well enough. It's not going to meet its targets, and that's what I'm here to report on.
Do you feel you're, as the Commissioner of the Environment of Ontario, when you look at everything that's happening right now, are we losing the battle on the environmental issues? We're talking about job creation, taxes. It looks like environment is the poor child of public debates right now. Is that your sense, or I'm too pessimistic?
There have been setbacks. Certainly, one has to acknowledge there's been setbacks in environmental policy and initiatives. Certainly across North America, not so much in Europe, not even in Asia, by the way. But certainly in North America, we're seeing that. But I don't think we're losing, because the immediate urgency of climate change is thrust upon us this year with greater emphasis. We see it all the time. So how long we can continue to try to ignore it, I don't know. That's the setback. But ultimately, if you like, Gaia will win, because climate change is real and acting upon us and acting upon our economies now, right today. And we'll continue to do so with greater severity, and eventually we'll have to catch on. So I know who the winner will be in the longer term, and I'll acknowledge there certainly are policy setbacks in the short term.
You have a sense that environmental issues have been put on the back burner
For the short term. But we'll see. I mean, I mean short term. I don't expect them to be on the back burner. We had, recent federal election and very little discussion about the environment. That is certainly, I'll acknowledge that is happening now. But I think the urgency, if you look at what's in your media outlets and what's being reported on, and what's going on in the world, the food shortages coming out of the droughts, the floods, the extreme weather events, etc. The reality is upon us, and we are experiencing it all the time. And this I would consider a relatively short-term phase of trying to ignore the real cause of the problem.
Mr. Miller, the government has spent a lot of money on closing the coal-fired plants and stuff, seemingly with minimal improvement in greenhouse gases and stuff. Was that the wrong thing to do?
Well, no, they have got fairly significant improvements of the greenhouse gases. They're going to get about 20, all said and done, they're going to about over 20 megatons of emission reduction, which is the biggest emission reduction in North America of any jurisdiction. So I don't buy it that they've got little benefit for that. I give them kudos for doing quite a significant thing on the coal plant. The problem is, after that, the toolbox is relatively empty. They don't have any more big projects like cutting off coal. So getting the next 5, 10, 20 megatons is extremely difficult, and that's what they're not prepared for.
Well, whatever the improvement was, it's come at great cost. It's costed more in electricity and all that stuff.
I don't agree with that, but it could be your opinion.
What you're saying is we need another big project after the closure of the coal-fired.
Actually, I think we need a whole bunch of more modest ones. In this report, we talk about the potential for sequestration of carbon in agricultural soils. That actually would be quite a large one if we went full scale and pursued that. So there are some opportunities out there of a little larger net size.